Welcome back. Now we're going to our first round of questioning, and we begin with the candidate of the ACPN. The office of the Vice President is often seen as that of a spare tire role to the office of the President. Do you think the office needs more responsibilities, or is okay as it is defined in the Constitution, the Nigerian 1999 Constitution as amended?
I have not seen the office of the Vice President as a spare tire, because it is the same constitution, it is the same qualification that the president of a country, of our country, must have, that the Vice President must have. And besides, roles were specified for both the president and the vice president. And don't forget, if the president is not around, it is the vice president that took over. And I want to tell you, to know how important the office of the president is, that it is not inferior to the presidency, is that if the vice president of our country takes any decision as acting president, the president of a country cannot legally go against that action. I remember when our president was away for some time, the president acted, and all decisions that were taken by him as acting president of this country were never controverted by the president. So the president, the first president of this country, is just like the office of the president. They have the same status, although one is higher, but none is inferior to the other.
Thank you very much. Candidate of the ANN, should you win this forthcoming election, you will be the first female vice president of Nigeria. How prepared are you for that role and the responsibilities that come with it?
Thank you for the opportunity to be here. Being a nation builder sticks from the heart. Somebody that builds a human being, that starts from the human development. So having to take the position of a vice president is not something that should be taken lightly, because a nation builder is that person who sees a problem and resolves it. Our party is well known for what it stands for. We're not talking about, we're not the politicians of the usual days that promises this and that. So what we are going to do is to ensure that every policies that have been taken collectively as a party will be implemented effectively. We have shared values, we understand what the policies are, we understand what the issues are, which issues who goes to the root of humanity. That is what we stand for. We stand for humanity and community development. So being a vice president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria is an office which must be taken seriously. It's an office which participates in all the cabinet meetings at office, which is about the economic development of, which handles the issues of economy. So what we are trying to do in our party is to ensure that the economy is diversified, the economy is vibrant enough to stop the too much dependency on a mono economy that we were used to ensure that every aspect of the 774 local governments that we have in Nigeria is upgraded to a commercial hub where every resource, every mineral resources would be enhanced and upgraded, where we would ensure that the issue of unemployment and every other issue that affects the economy right now will be well taken care of. So it is not an office that should be taken for granted. And as I stand, because of my background in humanitarian services and issues, and as a mother, we're used to a country who put politics before economics. In our party, we are putting economics before politics, because economics is the driving force. We're doing agriculture. We're talking about the diversification of agriculture, which this administration has already been doing. But what we'll do is much more than what this administration is doing.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you. Candidate of the APC, you have been vice president for the past 3.5 years, almost 3.5 years. How tasking has this role and responsibility been for you?
Thank you very much. First, I'm sure that those who know me quite well know that my hair was not this gray when I started out in 2015. So really, it has been tasking. It has been tasking, but it has also been an incredibly rewarding experience, especially from the point of view of the ability to do the things that one wanted to do all along as an individual. But the role is one where you are, in many senses, the chief advisor to the president of the country, and possibly the one person that will represent him, even just when he's absent for a meeting, as opposed to even when he's absent for longer periods. So there is a sense in which the role of the vice president is one that very closely mirrors the role of the president in very profound ways. But our vice presidency is different from the vice presidency of other countries because unlike other countries, even countries that have similar constitutions, our own constitution actually specifies roles for the vice president. So the vice president is the chairman of the National Economic Council. That is the council that's a council where all of the governors of the states meet every once in a month, and the vice president chairs that. That's a constitutional role. Aside from that, the vice president is also the chairman of the NCP. That's the National Council on Privatization. The vice president is also statutory chairman of about 22 different parastatals and agencies. And these are all defined by law. So in some senses, I mean, those who say, for example, that the vice presidential, or the role of the vice president is a spare tire, have it wrong because they probably are looking at other jurisdictions. In our jurisdiction, there are very specific rules that a vice president is entitled or is empowered by law to perform. But I think that one of the more interesting things about that role also is the fact that still a lot depends on the trust that exists between the president and the vice president, because the president does delegate several of his roles, and he can delegate those roles depending, of course, on how on the kind of trust that exists between both parties. So many times also that role is one where a good degree of trust is required between the two players, namely the president and the vice president. Where that trust exists, I think there is plenty of room for activity for the vice president. There's plenty that the vice president can do. And finally, I think that the role of the vice president, is one which also requires, I think a great deal of patience, because you may not always agree. You may not always agree with policy. You may not always agree with all the various aspects of what is being done. You may not always agree.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Time is up. Candidate of the PDP. Now, we have seen vice presidents fall out with their principals. Now, should this happen to you if you win the forthcoming election, how would you handle it?
Well, I assure you that won't be the case. Because like it's clearly stated, the vice president have a role, and the role of the vice president, to me, is most critical role, because we're talking about the economy of this country. The main problem of this country today is its economy. Economy is on the knees. And because it's not working, it's not creating jobs, it's not doing anything, the vice president is in charge of rigging this economy and rebuilding it to where you can create jobs, to where you can be able to ensure that there's financing in various areas of our government. The vice president is in charge of, for example, debt management. Today we have virtually at a level where our debt is unsustainable because we are using over 50% of our revenues to service debt, which means we don't even have enough to be able to do infrastructural projects that is highly needed in this country. Today, your country is owing about 22.7 trillion, $80 billion. And we need to do more, and you can't even find the money to do it. So the vice president office is critical. That you're not today part of G20, you're not part of BRICS nation, even the Mint nation where you are, is because you have a poor economy. Because if you look at the BRICS nations, every other government there, Mexico has a GDP of over 1 trillion and per capita of over 8,000. Turkey that is there has a GDP of 800 billion and per capita of over 10,000. Indonesia has, and your own is low. So the vice president has a role to build the economy, to create jobs, to be able to make the country work. So it's a critical role. In falling out with the president, if you're doing the right thing, you can't fall out with anybody. I can assure you of that. If you continue to do the right thing, because the vice president who chose you for a reason. He knows that you have something to deliver. So you're not there. You're there to be loyal to him and serve Nigeria faithfully. So I don't see where there's a problem. I can tell you I've never had any issue with anybody in government, and it won't start with this, because we will together start making Nigeria work again.
Thank you very much. Candidate of the Young Progressives Party. We run a presidential system of government which concentrates a lot of power in the office of the president. In a situation where you have a principal who hardly relinquishes power and authority, even when the Constitution mandates him or her to do so, how do you deal with such a situation?
Thank you very much, Mr. Medrojo. Let me start from the platform we're on. In Young Progressive Party, I think there's no any other party in Nigeria that has given priority to women, because most of the offices we have, even in the national level, are always, these are the woman is up and the man is deputizing, or the man is up and the woman is deputizing. Professor Kingsley Moghalu's presidency is about giving 50-50 opportunity to women to participate in his government in all levels of office, in all offices. So I don't think there's any presidential candidate who came up openly without any reservation to make this public. And I'm very, very sure him making this public, he really meant business. And I don't think at this level he will reverse it. That 50-50 gender equity is almost the priority in whatever we're doing in YPP and Moghalu's presidential candidacy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Let me say at this point in time that the next round of questions, you have 2 minutes each to answer the questions, and you have 1 minute of rebuttal if you do have anything to contribute to that question. Now, let me begin with the YPP, this end. It is said that about half of the Nigerian population lives in extreme poverty, which invariably gives us a sad appellation of the poverty capital of the world. How would you reverse this situation if you are elected Vice President of Nigeria?
Well, this question is taking us back to job creation and economy. Economy is the backbone of each and every country. We all know that. And the economy of Nigeria, as we all know, it's not giving us what we are expecting. So economy alone can never be over-exaggerated, because an economy constitutes of the constitutional restructuring, healthcare, security, education, youth empowerment, employment opportunities, or job creation. Let's take the constitutional restructuring. As Professor Kingsley Moghalu has in his own plan to restructure Nigeria, but constitutional restructuring, because I know everybody today is busy talking about restructuring, but we are talking of the real constitutional restructuring, whereby The central will, as it distribute power down to, then give them opportunity to test run and to own the resources they produce and control them. This is a very, very major thing that will bring back our economy into life and create jobs. And the second thing is power. If at all today in Nigeria we are able to decentralize the grid and distribute power and to make a grid in all the 6 geopolitical zones, there will be job creation. There will be enough power or 24 uninterrupted power supply. And solving power issues alone can solve 70 or 80% of Nigerian problem, because power is what is holding us back today. If at all in South Africa, they have only 75 million population and they are producing 50 something. Okay,
thank you very much. Candidate of the PDP. Now, closely related to that question is the fact that the aggregate investment in Nigeria in 2018 is put at about $60.8 billion, only 13.6% of our GDP. It has never gone above 16% in the last 10 years. Now, why have we failed so woefully? And what are you going to do differently as a government?
If you look at our economy, aggregate investment is not where I'm going to look about. Now look at the shallowness of the economy, starting from everything. If you look at, let me just use one thing, your capital market. Your capital market today is only $30 billion. It just lost $2 trillion anyway, about almost $8 billion in the past 1 year. But look at it. South Africa is $900 billion, the second economy in Africa. That shows the shallowness of your economy, because what you're doing is that you have a government that is trying to do what it's not supposed to do. The role of government is supervision and create the support and the guarantees that will enable private sector to drive the economy. So that investment needs to triple, because it's even low compared with your, that's why your size of your economy is very shallow. So for us, and that is why it's not creating jobs. That's why you have the level of unemployment you have today. So if you're talking about how to drive up the investment, if you look at everything that's been done, is that you need to look at the overall economy, regig it properly, where the private sector would drive the economy. There will be more investment. A lot of happen. Your banks today, all the loans they're giving is about 15% of your GDP. When other countries are doing 50, 100%, China alone is doing 250% of their GDP as credits to businesses, to private sector. And you can see why you have better investment in other nations than Nigeria.
Thank you very much, candidate of the All Progressives Congress. Whereas in 2018, Nigeria had an aggregate investment of $60.8 billion, a country like China has an aggregate investment of $5 trillion, which is about 41% of its GDP. South Africa, here in Africa, has a $65 billion aggregate investment, which is about 18.56% of its GDP. But in the last 10 years, Nigeria has not risen beyond 16%. What is the problem and how can it be tackled?
I think the common denominator of the countries you've mentioned, both China and South Africa, is strong infrastructure. Our country, over the past 16 years, has suffered a major infrastructure deficit. So we don't have rail, we don't have roads, power. When we came into office in 2015, power was at 4,000 megahertz. That is 16 years, in 16 years. So you need strong infrastructure, and nobody can make excuses about that. You've got to have strong infrastructure, which is one of the major focuses of our administration's policies, in putting in place the right infrastructure. The second thing is that you cannot have a thriving economy if you allow the type of grand corruption that has taken place in Nigeria in the past 16 years. I've heard one of the candidates say that fighting corruption is not an economic policy. With all due respect, if you don't have resources, if you don't have money, if the resources have been stolen, then you cannot possibly even generate jobs. You can't even build infrastructure. In the past 3 years, the government of President Muhammadu Buhari has spent 2.7 trillion on capital in Nigeria. That is the highest ever in the history of Nigeria, despite earning 60% less than the previous government. We have currently spent 2.7 trillion in 2 budget cycles, and we're earning 60% less. When oil was at $100 to $114 a barrel, no infrastructure was built. Today, oil is at sub-60. When we came into office, it was $28, going on to $30. Yet, we spent more on capital and on infrastructure. The second thing is that you must have poverty if you don't have a social investment scheme. I've heard some mention already about countries like India, like Mexico, like Brazil. These are countries that had a social investment policy. And that's the sort of thing we have also.
Thank you, sir.
Yes.
Right. Candidate of the Alliance for New Nigeria. Now, Nigeria's misery index is currently put at 51.26%, which is a combination of the sum of its unemployment and underemployment. Now, even when you use the old data and the current level of inflation. Now, what are you going to do to address this perennial and growing problem of misery and hopefully restore hope to the Nigerian common man?
Because of the policies we have with ANN, Alliance for New Nigeria, poverty has become endemic in every aspect. And despite what is, with due respect, His Excellency Vice President Osibajo have said, for all the efforts that the government has put in, we are doing a complete overhaul. Most problems that we have is the fact that our over 774 local governments are not fully developed. What we are trying to do is we're going to do the devolution of power. We're going to do resource control. We're going to do revenue, resource control and constitutional amendment, because those are the things that are structures that affects the endemic poverty that we have in Nigeria. Number one, in devolution of power, in the resource control policy that we have, we're looking at, like I mentioned earlier, that we're going to look at each resource that each local government has. Each local government will be given 20%. The 20% of the resource, the monies generated from each local government will be given to the people. 20% will be given to the local government. 20% will be given to the state government, and the 40% will be given. That way, more employment are generated, more monies are going around, more people. In China, most families, if you go to each family at the local government level, you'll find out that every person is producing something. The more vibrant the economy is, the better we are able to eradicate poverty. Another aspect that we're going to tackle is education, education is going to help to tackle most of the endemic poverty that we have in Nigeria. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Allied Congress Party of Nigeria, ACPN candidate. The value of the Naira has depreciated over time. In fact, at some stage, it dropped so sharply to $520 20 Naira to a dollar before recovering, and now we have multiple exchange rates in the country, ranging from 305 Naira to 364 Naira per dollar. What policies or initiatives do you intend to pursue to bring the forex market into equilibrium and reduce these misalignments?
Thank you. We are in a global village. The world is now a global village. And the level of production going on in the country determines the strength or otherwise of the currency of the country. if much are not going on in the economy of that state, please forget it. Because as it is, Nigeria does not have the capacity to determine the rate at which the naira is exchanged for other currencies of the world. To ensure a higher value for the naira, we need to look inward. An economy that depends solely for everything to come into the country, for everything to be imported, it's not a serious economy. And until something is done to reverse the trend, what we do is just to look inward, to ensure that whatever we can produce locally, we don't import it. Whatever we can produce locally, we don't import it. Then we look at the economy to re-engineer it, to make sure that the economy works. For instance, in the petroleum sector, what we do currently is to import all our PMS needs. This will be reversed. We will make sure that even if we at the moment does not have the capacity to refine and sell out, our government will do something to make sure that we add value to the product that you are selling out. That will create jobs. And in the regulation, what we do is to create the enabling environment and support the private sector to be able to drive the economy. As it is, the value of the naira is low because foreign direct investments are not coming. And until something is done to make sure, to give confidence to the international businessmen.
Thank you. Your time is up. We'll be going on a very short break. And when we return, we'll be talking more about the economy. But please let it be noted that if you have a rebuttal, which you are entitled to any of the points raised by any of the candidates, please indicate, and you'll be given the opportunity 1 minute to do so. But that's when we return from this break.